Hey, this is the World Advice Channel 2. What I want to talk about today is the problem with philosophy. So, when it comes to talking about the problem with philosophy, what I'll be talking about today, whether it is ancient Greek philosophy, 1800s German philosophy, Asian philosophy, whatever, what I'll be discussing is the problem with its way of thinking that it tries to give out to people, okay? So now that I've mentioned that, let's get started. So, when it comes to the problem with philosophy, okay, which anyone who knows even a little bit about philosophy, at least when it comes to the basic definition of philosophy, the purpose of philosophy is to give, um, something that is meant to better society, okay? And even though, like a lot of things that is meant to benefit society for that matter, the truth about philosophy is that it actually does the quite opposite, okay? And let me get into the problem with philosophy, okay? To sum it up, which I said I was going to do for the video, okay? So, what exactly is a problem with philosophy? Well, the problem with philosophy is that philosophy in general tends to, specifically since it's usually tends to be very negative and pessimistic all the times, tends to be something that encourages a way of thinking that is actually regressive for society to move forward, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, for philosophy, especially if you watch videos on YouTube, you pretty much hear the same exact things all the time. With the 3 points being these three main things, okay? First and foremost, we can't forget the legendary, classic, infamous humans suck. Second one is materialism is evil. And the third one is, you know, um, a generalization of violence, okay? Those are the three main things you tend to hear all the time. There's others, but those are the three main arguments you hear all the time, and that is a thing more like that I'm kind of sick and tired of, okay? It makes generalizations about things, um, you know, that are sometimes, and not even sometimes, all of them are a lot more deeper than, you know, taking it at face value as being a problem. And as a result of that, it just encourages a regressive way of thinking, okay? So now that I've mentioned that, let me explain why it encourages a regressive way of thinking, with the examples I give. The first one, of course, is the classic, materialism is bad, people wanting more, you know, to be wealthy and stuff, is a bad thing. But the truth of the matter is, I feel like if we actually lived in a world when it comes to that way of thinking, I truly believe we wouldn't have the things we have today. Because one of the things I have actually noticed about humanity is that we work so much better when we have a motive. In other words, it's something to inspire us to work, okay? And the idea of wealth and status and so on and so forth is a good way to encourage people to work harder. When people are likely to, of course, be inspired to get something from something, they're more likely to work harder, okay? Instead of just saying, I just live to live. And that is the one of the biggest problem with philosophy, okay? Is that it just encourages a regressive way of thinking, okay? Because to put it bluntly, we as humans, we're the most powerful species on the planet. And I just believe if a lot of the philosophy ways of thinking were, of course, things people actually lived out, whether it could be ancient Greek philosophers, Buddhist philosophy and stuff, we wouldn't have the things that we have today because materialism has helped develop society. Okay, it has helped inspire people. The idea of having bigger houses, intricate houses, and so on and so forth, has benefited people. Not even just the wealthy, but it has benefited everyday people because it encouraged people to get jobs, you know, encourage people to work more, and so on and so forth, which benefited everyday people, you know, um, even the ones who, of course, are not rich, okay? And that is the truth of the matter. So to just say materialism is evil, you should not want things that are more in life, it's just a really silly way of thinking that has just become extremely oversaturate this point in life. All that matters is that if you're successful, are you actually a good person and not a stupid person? Because most of the people who tend to kind of cause problems, not all the time to be fair, but the people who tend to cause problems when they're rich and successful tend to be certain types of people who are always like that anyway. Even when you talk about them, you know, with people who actually knew them growing up, they say they were always kind of like that. They're always talking about they want more in life and talking down on other people and all that shit. So that's what I'm trying to say. So I'm kind of sick and tired of that way of thinking, that I hear from philosophy all the time. The other one, of course, is the generalization of violence. Okay, the whole way of thinking, that, oh, violence, like seeking vengeance and so on and so forth, is wrong and this and that. But in all honesty, whether we want to admit it or not, okay, and I'm not even going to go into the moral ethics of vengeance, I'm just speaking using basic common sense, okay? In other words, the principles of cause and effect, okay? So just straight up logic, okay? And the truth of the matter is, when it comes to the whole topic of vengeance, I just feel, in all honesty, that if we didn't have that way of thinking, we would also, just like my first point, not be as advanced as we are today. Okay, even just going back to the days when human beings were hunter gatherers. Okay, I just feel like if we didn't have that way of thinking, specifically when animals were attacking us or even other human groups, but specifically, of course, animals, because we were not at the top of the food chain at that point in history. Okay, to be honest with you, we would not be as advanced as we are today. For all we know, we could still be hunter gatherers today. Because the truth of the matter is, when it comes to vengeance, okay, it actually does do things, okay, such as the fact that it takes out the obvious threat that is, of course, affecting you, like the animal that's trying to kill you all the time and eat you, it takes it out, okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, whether it's the animal trying to eat you or even maybe other human groups that are not very nice, taking them out so they no longer pose a threat. Okay, and even aside from that, to put it bluntly, even of course the last point, of the three main points I was discussing, which of course is the whole human sucks sort of thing, that is also a regressive way of thinking, okay? Because you also have to, like anything in life, actually kind of use critical thinking, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, look at how life was back then, okay? Most people were poor. Okay, people say today all the time, oh, people are poor as hell today. The middle class doesn't exist. Not really. Have you seen how people lived back then? The things we take for granted today, even being able to travel, eat food that actually is enjoyable to even a modest level, to even the fact that we have the ability to live long, was not things that was able for everyday people centuries ago, okay? That was, and not even centuries, thousands of years ago in ancient history, to sum it up, okay? The truth of the matter is, people didn't have those opportunities, okay? So if you're going to be someone who's of a rich upper status and say people are so evil and cruel and they're not willing to help each other, for the smallest of, for the fact that maybe somebody dropped some money once who's a rich nobleman and people just grabbed the money and ran off with it, that definitely seems like a very biased way of thinking. Specifically when you take into consideration a lot of the people who wrote these philosophies, who talked all this stuff about humans being evil, like the ancient Greeks, the obviously the other one being certain cultures in Asia and stuff. Also, when you actually read a lot of their works and opinions, actually had very prejudiced, evil ways of thinking, such as the fact that a lot of them owned slaves. Some of them even had male prostitutes, you know, and not even just that, some of them also believed pretty much their race was superior to every other group, specifically the ancient Greeks, who considered even other white European groups inferior to them. So it makes you kind of wonder, like, why am I taking anything seriously from someone who already has certain beliefs that are prejudiced? And that's the truth of the matter. So to sum up what I'm trying to say for all these points, okay, I just don't know if it's really good to really take philosophy seriously, okay? It's just too one-sided. It's always the same generic arguments. Humans suck, this and that. And the ways of thinking, to sum it up even more, what I'm trying to get across, are regressive for society, because for us to succeed, we have to want more. Sometimes when it comes to violence, we have to, you know, seek, um in other words, justice, instead of using the term vengeance, and seeing things in a way that humans suck and this and that, can just makes people miserable and not even want to interact with people, like we're seeing nowadays with the amount of introverts we see, to be honest with you. So to answer your question in short, I just find philosophy regressive. I just heard too much of the same arguments to the point it gets redundant and boring and tiring. And I just feel like what we need to understand about life is that life is about progress and always progressing. If it means wanting more, yes, it means wanting more. And that is the truth. If we want to continue to progress as a species. And that is the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. So, in short, that is my problem with philosophy. And that is all I have to say. So, bye.